You know what's a real pain in the ass? When your starter doesn't work and then some nice people see how desperate you look and offer to push start your car, and it's an automatic. Why do starters only ever fail in automatics? I don't know, but this is the third failed starter I have met in my life, and all the previous ones were automatics as well. Coincidence? I think not. Well, it probably is actually. So, on occasion, this starter here clicks and makes a whirring sound, but it doesn't crank. It sounds like the shaft is spinning, so I wonder if it does not extend the sprocket all the way because of dirt in the moving parts or something like that. Other times it works perfectly fine, but it is a deteriorating condition. From the outside it looks like it's got some dirt and oil on it, so my angle of attack is to just take it apart, clean it up, check the brushes and commutator while I'm at it, and replace what might need replacing, and what I can get as a spare part. After removing the solenoid, I manually checked the sprocket movement and found it to be smooth without any obvious resistance. Could still be a damaged solenoid or perhaps another problem I'm not seeing here. First, I am cleaning the grime off the outside of the starter using brake cleaner and a vinyl brush, which really helps loosen the dirt in conjunction with the brake cleaner. Then the cap over the rear end of the motor shaft comes off. Then the two long bolts which keep the whole assembly together. And now the DC motor can be detached from the front assembly, which houses the sprocket, as well as the quite elaborate mechanism which takes care of moving it in and out of mesh with the teeth of the flywheel. You can see here a comparison between brand new motor brushes and the ones found in the starter motor. They are not worn down to the copper wire, but I am not 100% sure what their minimum length is, and they cost about €2.50, so they're a reasonably cheap spare part to replace while you're having the thing apart anyway. After taking the motor shaft out of the housing, I am washing some more dishes as the oil and dirt have crept into pretty much everything except the DC motor housing. That one only has dust from use-up brushes and probably burnt commutator in it. Then I am removing the back end of the motor housing using an electrical screwdriver as a pull hammer, so the brush assembly can be removed. The brushes are soldered into their carrier frame. I am removing them all to make space for the new ones. Soldering in the new brushes turned out to be quite tricky for me, as my hands tend to not sit still long enough for the solder to cool down. Also, I found I am lacking at least one hand for this job. I must be some kind of mutant. But as I am also an Apex tool user, I compensated for the lack of a third hand by using a vise to hold the carrier frame. After some trying, I managed to get the job done well enough to stop trying any further. Now, feeling that I have cleaned up everything, I am oiling the moving parts and reassembling the front section of the starter. I'm about to put the DC motor back together and, having a look at the commutator, I'm wondering to myself whether it would perhaps benefit from being given a once-over on the lathe. I am not sure if I'm going to make anything better or perhaps worse by doing this, but I thought it might be a neat thing to do and fairly low risk. So, out goes the 3-jaw, in goes the ER25 collet chuck. The rotor gets held by a collet on one end and supported with a live center on the other. I checked it with the dial indicator how true it ran, and well, it didn't run very true, but I also don't have any idea what the manufacturing tolerance of these things is. It's not a motor that does a lot of continuous running, so maybe this is perfectly fine. Then I am skimming it a few passes until there's only very little of the original surface remaining. I am satisfied with the result on the grounds that it does not look as messy as I had feared it might. Back in my comfy chair, I am cleaning up the gaps between commutator contacts with a knife to make sure there won't be any current going where it's not supposed to. Next, the rotor and stator are put back in position. And the brush carrier dropped in. Here I ended up using garbage bag ties to hold the brushes back, which I can then cut and pull out from under the brushes once they are in place over the commutator. My first attempt at this was with zip ties, but they turned out to be too thick to fit between commutator and brush mounts. Then the rear cap is put over the brush carrier and the two main bolts are put back in place, joining the two sections of the starter motor back together into one unit. The clip which locates the rotor inside the stator is put back into place and the rear bearing is given a drop of oil. The rear cap is installed and the thick lead coming out of the housing is reattached to the solenoid. The part is now reassembled and can be reinstalled in the car. I had taken some pictures before disconnecting the wires from the starter, but naturally I have perfect memory, and also this is very simple for a near genius such as myself. So after I put it back on the gearbox and wired everything up using my massive brain, I am now reconnecting the starter battery like so. And then I redid it again while checking the pictures. And the starter worked and we lived happily ever after. No, the starter didn't work, because the one thing I didn't think to check, or wasn't able to check rather, was the freewheel mechanism on this rocket, and that's probably what's broken. Solenoid clicks, starter motor spins, gears mesh presumably, but no torque is transmitted onto the crankshaft. In hindsight, super easy diagnosis, but hard to test with my thumbs and, you know. Yeah. Long story short, I ordered a new one. Cheapest I could get, it will probably still outlive this car. You might think it is a bummer to do so much work and then end up having to replace the part anyway. But I also do it because I find this sort of thing therapeutic, and because there's always a chance of actually fixing something instead of just tossing it in the bin. When it happens to work out, it feels really nice. When something ends up being unfixable for me, I still learn something in the process, and as I said, it soothes my troubled mind. See you next time. Make sure you bring your own food and drinks, as I am not licensed to sell them. Oh, and also thanks for watching.